My stepdad used to tell me I'd never amount to anything. He'd say it with a sneer, like it was a fact carved in stone. My mom would just stand there, silent, and nod. Her silence was his permission slip. So, when I finally clawed my way out of that hell, I made a promise to myself. I would make sure they had nothing left but their empty words and the echoes of the life they destroyed. This is the story of how I took my life back by systematically destroying theirs. If this story hits home for you, or if you just believe no one should ever have to go through something like this alone, subscribe and follow my journey. Your support is a light in a world that can sometimes feel very dark, and it means more than you know. For years, my home wasn't a home. It was a prison disguised with floral curtains and family photos. My stepdad was the warden, a petty tyrant ruling over his tiny, miserable kingdom, and my mother was the guard who handed him the keys every single night. They thought I was their prisoner forever. What they never, ever expected was that I'd be the one to burn it all down and walk away with their ashes. It started the way these things often do, quietly, insidiously. My parents split when I was little, and my mom remarried when I was 8. In the beginning, the man she married, David, seemed unremarkable. He was a handyman, good with his hands, and at first, that meant fixing the leaky faucet and building me a bookshelf. He had a surface-level charm that fooled everyone. But that charm was a mask, and soon after we moved hours away from my grandparents, my friends, and everything I knew, it started to slip. The isolation was the first weapon he used. He brought that same brutal, forceful energy he used on busted pipes and broken walls into our home, and soon, into my life. The first time he put his hands on me, I was 10. It was a Thursday. I remember because we'd had pizza, and I'd been happy. Later that night, he came into my room. He called the nightly visits our little secret, a special bond just for us. My mom was right in the next room. The walls were paper-thin. I know she heard my muffled sobs. I know she heard his footsteps leaving my room night after night. To this day, I am certain she heard everything. She just chose the bliss of pretending to be asleep over the horror of admitting what her husband was. And my mom's silence? That was its own special kind of cruelty, a betrayal that cut deeper than his fists ever could. It wasn't just that she did nothing. She actively enabled him. She was his co-conspirator. If I cried at the dinner table or even looked at him the wrong way, she'd pull me aside later, her voice a sharp, terrified whisper. "Don't provoke him," she'd hiss. "You know how he gets." As if my fear was some kind of invitation. As if my pain was an inconvenience to her. She depended on him for money, for the house, for the car. She chose that fragile security over her own daughter, every single day for years. The mind games were constant and suffocating. He'd threaten me with a smirk. "Go ahead, tell your mom. She's not going to believe you. She'll kick you out before she ever leaves me." And the most twisted part is, he was right. She'd already made her choice, and it wasn't me. This went on for 4 agonizing years. I learned to hide bruises under long sleeves, even in the summer. I became a ghost in my own house, a shadow haunting the hallways of a life that wasn't mine. I was just trying to take up as little space as possible to become invisible. The stress and fear were a physical weight on my chest. It felt like I was perpetually sad, a deep, gnawing ache that never went away. By the time I was a teenager, that sadness had spiraled into a deep, dark depression. I felt utterly alone, trapped with the 2 people who were supposed to protect me, the very same monsters under my bed. That was my reality from age 10 to 14. For years. 1,460 days of a living nightmare. The breaking point, the moment everything shattered for good, came on a Tuesday afternoon. He'd been drinking more than usual and was angry about a bill. He cornered me in the kitchen, backing me against the counter, his voice a low growl. For the first time ever, I didn't freeze. I fought back. I shoved him, hard, with all the strength my terrified body could muster. The look in his eyes. I'll never forget it. Pure, unrestrained rage. What happened next is a blur of pain and sharp flashes of the yellow kitchen tiles. But when it was over, when I was on the floor, my mother didn't rush to my side. She didn't scream at him. She walked slowly over to him, put a gentle hand on his arm, and asked in a soft, concerned voice, "Are you okay?" In that single, soul-crushing instant, I knew I was completely and irrevocably alone. Any lingering fantasy I had that my mother was also some kind of victim, that she was just scared or trapped, died right there on the cold kitchen floor. She wasn't a bystander. She was his accomplice. She was a willing partner in my destruction. And that was my breaking point. That was the moment the victim died, and a survivor began to plan. The very next day at school, I felt like a zombie walking through the halls. Every laugh and every normal conversation felt like it was from another planet. During my lunch break, I walked on autopilot to my school counselor's office. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I sat in the chair across from her desk, and for a full minute, I couldn't speak. Then the dam broke. I told her everything. The secrets I had held in my chest for years spilled out in a torrent of tears and choked whispers. It was the hardest, most terrifying thing I had ever done. A CPS investigation was launched immediately. The relief I felt was quickly replaced by a new kind of terror. My stepdad and mother, faced with an outside threat, put on the performance of their lives. They presented a perfect, united front, denying every single word. They were pillars of the community. I was just a troubled, dramatic teenager. They were so calm, so convincing. The case was eventually dropped for lack of evidence. It didn't matter, though. The secret was out. The foundation of our family was cracked beyond repair, and there was no going back. For my own safety, I was placed in the care of my aunt, my mom's estranged sister, a woman my mother had always called judgmental. She lived 3 states away, and stepping into her quiet, calm house was like taking my first breath after nearly drowning. For the first time in years, I could actually sleep through the night without fear of footsteps in the hall. But just being safe wasn't enough. Not even close. The rage I felt was a clean, cold thing. The memory of my mother choosing him over me on that kitchen floor lit a new kind of fire inside me. This wasn't about survival anymore. This was about retribution. My revenge couldn't just be an emotional outburst. That's what they would expect. It had to be cold, calculated, and absolute. They had used their power and the illusion of a happy home to break me, so I decided I'd use my brain and the power of the law to dismantle them. The trauma had left its scars, diagnosed PTSD, crippling anxiety, and major trust issues that I still work on to this day. But it also gave me a razor-sharp focus. I graduated high school with honors and worked 3 jobs all through college with one singular goal in mind: law school. I was a waitress, a library clerk, and a tutor. Every dollar I earned, every sleepless night I spent studying, was fuel. It's deeply ironic, isn't it? The same legal system that had failed me so profoundly as a child was about to become the very weapon I would wield for my revenge. It took years of relentless, grinding work, but at 25, I passed the bar exam. All that time, I kept tabs on them. A secret social media account allowed me to watch from a distance. They were still married, still living in the same house, and had started a family business in home repair and construction. The irony was sickening. They had built this whole public image of a happy, hard-working, church-going couple. The perfect family. I spent the next 5 years gathering my ammunition with painstaking patience. I had my old diaries, filled with the frantic handwriting of a scared little girl. I had records from my therapist detailing years of trauma and its specific effects on my life. I hired a private investigator who managed to get anonymous, sworn statements from 2 old neighbors who admitted they'd always suspected something was wrong but were too afraid to get involved. I was building my case, brick by painful, meticulous brick. Everything had to be legal, methodical, and utterly undeniable. The plan kicked off with a simple phone call, my heart pounding with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. I used a burner phone and a voice I'd practiced for weeks, posing as a potential client with a new rental property. I hired my stepdad's company for a small renovation project. When the day of the consultation came, I wore a wire. We walked through the property, and as we discussed drywall and paint colors, I casually brought up my own, troubled teenage years with a difficult family. Arrogant as ever, he took the bait. He laughed it off. "Yeah, I was hard on my stepkid back then," he admitted, his voice captured in perfect digital clarity. "Kids need a firm hand. Sometimes you have to show them who's boss." It wasn't a full confession to the crimes, but it was an admission of his mindset. It was the first crack in his carefully constructed armor. Next up was my mother. I knew her weakness was her reputation and her desperate need for community approval. I arranged to meet her for coffee, an invitation she probably thought was me, her long-lost daughter, finally trying to reconcile. I looked her in the eye and gave her a deal. One last chance. I told her to tell the truth about what she knew, to acknowledge her part in it, and maybe, just maybe, I could find it in me to forgive her. She refused. Her face hardened, and she called me cruel for bringing up the past. "You need to just let it go," she said, her voice shaking with self-righteous anger. That was the last chance she ever got. A week later, an anonymous package arrived at the homes of the leaders of her beloved church group. It contained the sworn statements from the neighbors about the screaming they used to hear and carefully selected, anonymized excerpts from my therapy records detailing the long-term effects of childhood neglect and emotional abuse. The tight-knit community that was her entire social life, her source of validation, crumbled almost overnight. She was quietly asked to step down from her committees. The invitation stopped coming. She was cast out, stripped of her friends and her precious reputation. Then came the final, decisive strike. I filed a multi-million-dollar civil suit against them both for years of abuse, negligence, and the resulting ongoing emotional and psychological distress. My stepdad, in his incredible, blinding arrogance, did exactly what I had prayed he would. He countersued me for defamation of character. It was the single greatest mistake he could have possibly made. In court, I wasn't that scared little girl in the kitchen anymore. I was a lawyer in my element, in my power. I cross-examined him myself. I watched the color drain from his face as I approached the witness stand. I played the audio from our consultation. I presented his own words, his own dismissive attitude toward a stepkid, to the jury. I used the mountain of evidence I'd collected over a decade to tear his lies and his self-pitying narrative apart, one by one. The jury saw him for exactly what he was, a bully and a monster. They saw my mother for what she was, his enabler. The verdict was everything I had worked for. The jury awarded me a massive sum for pain, suffering, and punitive damages. A lien was immediately placed on all their assets, his business and their home. The very house where my nightmare had taken place now belonged to me, on paper. The aftermath was as fast as it was brutal. My stepdad was financially and spiritually ruined. His business was seized and liquidated to begin paying the judgment he owed me. He was a broken man who had lost everything. My mother lost her home, her husband, and the community she had valued more than her own child. My aunt told me she ended up homeless, staying on a series of couches, with no one left to turn to. She tried to contact me several times, leaving rambling, tearful voicemails begging for help and for money. I listened to the first one, then I blocked her number. I had nothing left to say. And me? The money was never the point. It was a tool. It was about taking back the power and the control they had stolen from me. They say living a happy, successful life is the best revenge. I don't know if that's entirely true. I think sometimes justice is the best revenge. I finally feel free. They tried to bury me, but they didn't know I was a seed. Thank you for listening to my story. It wasn't easy to share, but I truly believe in the power of speaking out, of taking back your own narrative. If any part of this resonated with you, if you've ever felt voiceless, please like and share this video. You never know who out there needs to hear that they aren't alone, and that it really is possible to reclaim your life, piece by piece. And if you have a story of your own, I hope you find a safe person and a safe space to share it. Your voice is valid, and it deserves to be heard. What do you think of this story? Please drop your comment, subscribe, share, and hit the like button.